The Middle English Period, presented by Andrea Markovits, Angelica Michalopoulos, Brianne Brine, Lisette Barnes, and Sarah O'Vara. The Middle English period extended from 1100 to 1500. French cultural influence. The event that began the transition from Old English to Middle English was the Norman conquest of 1066, when William the Conqueror invaded the island of Britain from his home base in northern France. The Anglo-Norman period was comprised of culture associated with French ideals because of this last Normannic invasion led by William the Conqueror, who instilled a French court after uniting England. This invasion had two lasting impacts to the culture of the Anglo-Normans of the time. The first impact was primarily on the official language of the Anglo-Normans. French soon took over as the most prominent language. This led to a language impact, New English. This language of New English is a mix of the Old Germanic language with some of the French words that sound quite familiar to modern-day words. The Normannic invasion set the stage for the dramatic end of the Anglo-Saxon reign in 1066, with the Battle of the Hastings effectively defeating Harold II. The Canterbury Tales. Middle English literature also contained a large amount of influence from political situations and ecclesiastical documents. One of the greatest poets of the time was a man by the name of Geoffrey Chaucer. He was an English poet that lived from 1343 to 1400 and wrote a large amount of Middle English poems. One of his most popular poems were a series of tales called the Canterbury Tales, which were a collection of more than 20 stories Geoffrey Chaucer wrote at the end of the 14th century Middle English time period. He never finished this large series of stories, but the basis of the stories is about a group of 30 pilgrims who ventured across the lands of England to Canterbury. This story has a large amount of cultural attributes of the time period, and even the names and stations of the characters show the culture of the Middle English period. The Normans. New English. The Normans bequeathed over 10,000 words to the English language, and just about one-third of these words are used even today. Most nouns ending in the suffixes age, ants, ents, ant, meant, ity, shun, or starting with the prefixes con, de, ex, trans, and pre are branched off from the Norman New English language. It's very simple to think of hundreds of examples for all of these suffixes and prefixes. A lot of the words that we get from the Normans have to do with nobility. Signing, swen, earl, knight, lady, and lord are all words that we've taken from this New English language. During the Norman ruled centuries, English was only the third language in its own country. It was also seen as the language of the peasantry or uneducated folk. Middle English Romance. Though Middle English had a lot of talk of war and brutality, conquering and battle, tales of courtly love and chivalry became a crucial center for the new court. One possibility of how this romantic site came into the culture was the efforts of poets like Marie de France, who wrote Lais and other works. Elements of romantic literature during this period typically concern chivalry questions, romantic love, and magic. This had quite a bit to do with the tone of the poems and the literature during this time. There were many subgenres that fall under the heading of medieval romance, such as the Breton lay and Arthurian romance. These romances contain unrealistic ideals of this day and age. They centered around adultery, where one of the parties were involved in marriages, but held onto passion that would not be consummated. Romantic literature examples. Breton lay literature was a literary version of lays sung to the accompaniment of the harp. An example of Breton lay literature is Sir Gulthar Sir Degar. Breton lay literature was a short, rhymed romance retelling a story of love and romance. Arthurian romance literature follows the chronicles of King Arthur's life and his knights, as well as other adventures they proceeded to embark upon. Authors singly or collaboratively produced vast romance cycles, generally in prose, which could unite the biography of Arthur and his knights with the story of Merlin, the illicit love of the Lancelot and Guinevere, the question for the Holy Grail, and in some instances, the Tristan material. Middle English romance continues. An interaction between knight and lady would focus on the knight gallantly trying to swoon the lady with his various chivalrous deeds. Generally, women characters with the literature were placed on high pedestals. The view of women was quite ironic considering that in this time, men were seen as the superior gender and women were seen as property.